Piersanti, welcome to Café CLIL. It's such a pleasure and a privilege for us to have some of your time. And you're in the Liceo James Joyce in Rome, and your background...
It's not actually in Rome. It's in Roman castles, 25 kilometers from Rome.
In one of the suburban areas of Rome, right? And actually your background is geography and sociology, and you're teaching through English. So tell us about your experiences of teaching geography and sociology and the level and how your students cope, basically your impressions of your job.
I mean, I like it very much because, I mean, I like languages, and I think that languages should be taught not only through grammar, but also as a means of communication. And that's why my students like it, because they start reading in English, talking in English, and also maybe using resources, and they really like it. So I think it's a different way of learning the language, because in Italy we study English from primary school to secondary school to the end of secondary school, around 3 hours per week. But sometimes my students are not able to ask for a sandwich in a bar because they study grammar, they study literature, but then they are not able to use the language. And so studying in English and using the language during the lessons, because I've learned through after many years of teaching that it's not worth switching from Italian to English, but I usually use only English. At the beginning they are shocked, and some of them don't understand what I'm saying, also because I sometimes talk too fast. So I try to slow it down, and I use a lot of support because I use slides, I use materials, I use pieces of paper, anything that comes to mind. And I usually give them a sort of scaffolding with new vocabulary. So I give them the vocabulary I'm going to use and prepare activities so they can learn the vocabulary I'm going to use. And then I start with the lesson, trying to make it active. So with exercises, videos, activities. And usually it works. Because at the beginning they stare at me like I'm an alien, but then in the through maybe mid-year we usually start
find their feet and their pace by mid-year.
They say, okay, I might not understand everything, but I know what I'm doing, and that's what I
tell us a little bit about your resources, Laura, if I may, because before we started, you mentioned the Cambridge IGCSE, and that represents the textbook material you're using, yeah?
Yeah, we have a textbook, although I need to prepare my own resources. So I usually prepare slides with not only with the vocabulary, but with the main concepts, so that they can start from something they actually understand. Because especially, I don't know, last editions of the books are very wordy. And the students get lost, especially at the beginning, because they don't have maybe, so I mean, their level of English are really different. So I can have maybe students who are native speakers and students who maybe enrolled in the class because they wanted to improve their English. So the levels are really very different.
So you kind of moderate, sorry to interrupt, but really what you're saying is you kind of adapt what's in the textbook to meet those diverse levels in the classroom.
Yes, they're really diverse, and I need to support especially the weakest students. So the weaker ones are, sometimes I I think I can lose them if I don't support them enough. So some of them, I lose some of them anyway because they decide it's not for them. But that's right, because not all people should do the same things. So if they realize it's not for them, they are allowed to take other classes. But usually we succeed in keeping most of them, and that's a success.
Wonderful. I mean, there's an advantage with geography and sociology, of course, isn't there, that they both deal with the real world, so
Yes.
there must be, I think, many avenues you can take for bringing in further resources. You mentioned videos, for example. I guess that means there's a lot of preparation that you've got to do to add these resources.
A lot of preparation, because Cambridge gives you some, but they are not enough. So I usually browse the internet. I use short videos, but I need to maybe put subtitles, because there are the auto-generated subtitles, but they don't work usually. So I usually maybe prepare short clips with, and I add subtitles, and I prepare maybe the transcription in advance with all the vocabulary. So I give them the vocabulary in advance, and then I play the video, make them work with the video, and there is a lot of work.
There's a lot of material out there, isn't there? I mean, I visited Milan recently to do some teaching in schools and workshops, and the school requested me to deal with something very contemporary. It was the King's Speech.
Wow.
One was with grade 5 secondary, and the other class was with grade 3 secondary. And with the grade 5 secondary, they wanted a focus on the soft political power language that Charles's speech incorporated. And I discovered, Laura, this might be interesting for you, that the royal family has its own YouTube channel. And it also has an archive of all the royal speeches. So, finding resources and then adapting those resources is a very time-consuming thing. But there is a lot of very good quality, real world material out there.
It could be interesting. So, I'm always interested in new things, and I'm not able to use the same material each year. So I usually prepare more because I need to be interested myself in order to interest my students.
I think that's a very important thing, isn't it? That actually within a CLIL context, something I've felt myself is that the resources are very organic, in that we alter them, update them, and change them or reject them, depending on how we feel our students are coping with the concepts and the language. And I think that's quite a healthy thing. I think when teachers are not just taking a book and delivering it, it's really about the process of knowing the students and preparing for what we know about.
Finding something that they actually like. And also maybe with the Cambridge course, sometimes is more suited to a specific reality, a specific country. So I need to find examples that relate to my students, not to maybe English students. So, nothing against English students, but they might not share the same interests.
Absolutely. It is a truism, isn't it, that the books are a generic cultural standard, and actually your students' reality of life can be very different from what's in the pages of the textbook. You mentioned, before we started, I was asking about your experience more broadly, and we talked a little bit about how CLIL is going generally in Italy. And my feeling with my visit to Milan was that we need a bit of a boost to the system. We need a bit of energy implemented again, perhaps because of the circumstances of the job. And I know in your case, it's a personal choice to be teaching geography and sociology through English in your school, and it's popular, and you're happy to do it, so why not do it? But that is an individual teacher. Maybe you could say a few words about how you feel the system could encourage more of what you're doing.
I think in Italy there is a big problem with the implementing of CLIL because it should be mandatory, but it's not due to the rule is not. It's disregarded due to internal contradictions because we don't have enough qualified teachers. The teachers are not, their work is not recognized, and also it's not paid. And so not many teachers want to be involved. And also, as CLIL should be implemented, especially during the last year of secondary school, there are the problems with the state exam. So the students are all busy preparing the exam. They don't want to do extra work. And also the examining board might not have qualified teachers. So now the rule is there, but it's disregarded. So I think they should not only, and the strange thing is that they are trying to extend CLIL to primary and preschool. So I actually taught a course in 2024 for primary teachers for them to teach CLIL. But it's just on paper. So, I mean,
so in a way, what we're coming to is a conclusion that suggests that the CLIL implementation has to start in pre-service teacher education, doesn't it? It has to start with the future teachers being qualified, and then all of the other conditions that you mentioned, of course, the pay and conditions and resources, they all come hand in hand. So this is an appeal in a way, isn't it, Laura, to people with the decision-making power to get on board and reinvigorate the CLIL.
To make it feasible.
I've got my bog standard coffee mug here today.
Yes, I've gone back to the Mariners. I've gone back to football. I'm in this World Cup business. I prefer a bit of good rootsy football. You know, the Mariners, where you can tell sociologically speaking that obviously Grimsby is a fishing town.
Well, that puts it right into the theme of our discussion, doesn't it? Geography and sociology. And many thanks to Laura Piersanti for joining us and giving us some nice insights into, you know, the chalk face, a teacher teaching geography and sociology through English in Italy. And she raises quite a lot of issues. And one of the things she talks about, Phil, is the idea of scaffolding new vocabulary. And I thought that was very interesting because she's focusing on, you know, method straight away. And I wanted to jump on that because people who are interested in teaching geography or sociology through English might not know where to go and look for some resources that deal with vocabulary. So I put this on the table because when I wrote this for Macmillan, it's based on GCSE, 2 years, 14, 16-year-old geography, the language of geography. And the whole thing is scaffolding alongside the themes. And the other one that John and I worked on were slightly younger levels, EAL workbook for Jog 1 course book for OUP. They're still available, and you know, that's something that can help as a bit of a foundation for dealing with scaffolding vocabulary. She also mentioned, I think, which is quite interesting, is that she's got diverse levels of students in her class. So of course, how you scaffold vocabulary for those different levels of learners is crucial, isn't it? Whatever the subject really, but it's crucial.
She used the word, the subject is quite wordy, she said. Some of the texts are wordy. It was a nice adjective of that.
Yeah.
And of course, that's true. And, you know, texts, certainly written texts in social science are pretty cowpy, are they? They do respect the academic discourse, and well, you've had experience with the Macmillan book. It's great, and the other one with John. And you know, I also wrote that or contributed to the writing of what we call the SLIC, which is Social Science Language Integrated Curriculum. Fine acronym that.
Very nice acronym.
And where the English curriculum was supporting the geography stuff, which was being done again, 14 to 16, was being done through English here, and so we both had experience of this. And so it can get a bit wordy, although again, for some of the I insist, you know, some of the vocabulary, a lot of the vocabulary is very Latinate, but that doesn't necessarily help. At least it does give them a start. As opposed to Chinese students studying it, for example. But
it's interesting you should say that. I've had that comeback from colleagues in Italy when looking at academic language, general academic language. And a response I did get from colleagues in Italy was, well, they don't need so much help with that because a lot of it's Latinate. I'm not entirely sure that's true. And of course it's a help if your mother tongue has roots which are similar to the academic language of the curriculum that you're studying, but using it in...
Well, that's right, because I mean, if you asked the average 14-year-old on the street of England, if you said, what does the word demographic mean? Or define demographic, they would struggle as a native speaker. So the fact that it's demografico in Italian doesn't necessarily mean that they either understand it as a concept or can talk about it. So yeah, it's true that the cognate thing it's a way in, Keith, as you say, but you've got to go further. I've got a good example of that later on if you want to talk about that. I mean, about when I was I was given a job to do. I had to write workbooks for a major publisher whose books were a bit too wordy, and they were asking me to support these books, and I came across this very problem.
Very nice. I mean, the other resource, now we're talking about resources, I think I have to shout out about Macmillan's onestopenglish.com website. I'll put the link in. Please, anybody watching, listening, if you're looking for any resources that are CLIL or other resources, actually, the whole website is going to close down at the end of this month, June. And they've offered anybody registered can download anything they like for the remainder of its lifespan. There's lots of CLIL stuff for geography in that website. Your CLIL section has what we produced were these glossaries, these long audits of language that were specific for certain concepts. So cause and effect language in geography, you've got a nice glossary alongside a lesson that accompanies it. And all that's there to take. So by the end of June, go and get it, colleagues.
That's right. And well, Macmillan also gave me, they were one of the first people who allowed me to pontificate about CLIL and what it is. What I think some of those...
You've got an article there, which is called What is CLIL, haven't you?
That's right. And I think there was a series of them. I think I did about 3 there. Yeah. I mean, that seems like the Jurassic period now, but I'm sure I've more or less done by what I said back then. So they're still there. Yeah.
Well, we look forward to how it evolves, because they have that on their website that they are now, they're closing this down in order for evolution to take place. So we'll see what comes of it.
Yeah.
The other thing that Laura mentions that I think is worth us picking up on is this getting materials to be sensitive to context, because she's working with Cambridge IGCSE Geography and Sociology, hard CLIL stuff, but she adapts it to fit local, cultural, demographic, historical, heritage needs, and I think that's a very worthy way of approaching CLIL, isn't it? You're already adapting stuff so that it pays respect to your learners' backgrounds.
Well, not only that, but if you think about, I'm just taking not an obvious topic, but one that can certainly be exploited by kids at any level, the concept of push and pull, in migration. So, if you wanted to deal classically with push and pull in migration, you would deal with it rather at a distance. You'd say, push factors are things like earthquakes and floods and political conflicts, and pull factors are things that attract people to migrate, like the NHS, a free national health system, etc., that kind of thing. And you could always classically in geography deal with that, at a distance, but now you don't need to do that. You just simply say, okay, let's look at the push and pull factors as a concept, but let's look at it in terms of our own region, because everybody now in Europe is experiencing this issue of migration. And then you can, of course, go further and you can get more political depending on the age of the kids or whatever. So absolutely, the adaptation of that push and pull now to people's local context is way, way more salient than it used to be. Yeah. So exactly.
One of the things we talked about before we started the recording was 2 fairly big things that are happening out in the world of education, but in the world generally, is the OECD and the EU collaborated on a new framework they've called AI Literacy Framework, published yesterday. I'll put a link to it in the notes. And the other thing, I talked to you about the Leo Pope's encyclical, where he takes issue with AI. And to cut a long story short, what comes out of this OECD curriculum for human flourishing, it's called, and the Pope uses the same phrase, human flourishing, in his document. There are 5 major concepts, overarching concepts within that. I'm going to read them because they're so interesting, and I think it's all related to this, you know, putting learning in the context of the learners, which is what we're talking about with Laura's adapted materials.
Yes.
Adaptive problem solving, the ability to vary behaviors and understanding to tackle novel complex challenges where routine solutions fail while self-regulating and adapting to feedback. Wow, that's the first one. Ethical competence, the capacity to evaluate diverse viewpoints, combat prejudice, balance individual needs with the common good and the rights of the planet. Interpreting the world, the ability to make sense of rapid changes, process complex information and build a deep multidimensional understanding of our environment. Appreciating the world, developing an aesthetic, cultural and personal connection to the beauty, creativity and diversity of the world. Acting in the world, the agency, confidence and self-belief to shape your own life and contribute meaningfully to society and fair, sustainable organizations. I mean, if there ever has been, you know, like a holy grail of curriculum summary of concepts, it's going to be that, isn't it? And I think what it's got nothing to do with contextualizing resources that come from another country, but it's got everything to do with how you think about building your students' educational environment, way beyond CLIL, of course. But I think one of the great things about CLIL is that slowing down to the level of concepts and thinking about language gives you room and space to be creative with, you know, self and others, which is what a lot of this concept framework is about.
I think it's great, you know, and if you were looking on this, what you just read, if you were looking upon it a bit cynically, you're saying that's a bit airy-fairy, that's a bit abstract. Well, it's not actually, because if you've dealt with curriculum descriptions, which I have, and they can often sound a bit general and airy-fairy, that I don't think that's airy-fairy at all. You know, you can soon, as you were reading it, I was going, right, my materials writing was going, okay, boom, boom, boom. I can see where I could put that. I can see how I could exploit that, you know, in either a hard CLIL context or even an English context. You know, how could English teachers reject this kind of thing? It's an obvious move for the English curriculum, certainly foreign language English curriculum to develop. You know, there you go. So. And it's, you know, it's that what
in our discussion about geography and sociology, they sound as if they could come from literally out of the realm of geography, sociology, educational thinking, curriculum thinking.
Yes.
I particularly like the focus because this is all being produced in the age of AI. And we have to come back to this. We'll get somebody to come and talk to us about AI, Phil. I think it's time.
Yes.
But I think, you know, it's all come out in the time of AI where, you know, you've got this super fast train coming down the track at us, whether or not we're on it, basically. And then there are these wonderful minds out there, Parsi Salberg, thinking about humans within this era of artificial intelligence.
No, absolutely. That's been my view of it as well. I think that, you know, the more AI becomes this debate, and it has to be debated because we can't be King Canute, we can't turn it back. You know, the more that it gets debated, the more in a sense you emphasize the converse, no? The human aspect. You know, what's the implication of human education? In Isabella's question, for example, on LinkedIn last week about is there any point in teaching writing skills now that AI can do it better? Well, of course there is, but you know, we have to be very careful about and think about why. Of course, it is important because, you know, writing is intimately connected to cognitive development, and so there's not a point where you suddenly stop. Of course, AI can do it better, but again, what does better mean, etc., etc. We'll come on to this. We'll get someone to come.
I will link to those documents I've referred to.
Yeah.
The Pope's got his own website, of course, so you can find everything there. and the OECD publish really very thoughtful podcasts and webinars about this curriculum for human flourishing. But I haven't read the collaborative document OECD EU AI literacy framework, but I will now I've got hold of it. And, you know, I think it's time for us to invite somebody, an expert in AI in education, come tell us what they think, and we can relate it to CLIL.
No, we'll do it. Hey, look, Keith, I really don't want to let this session go without mentioning something, and just to bring it down a little bit. Well, not bring it down a bit, but I don't mean that. But I mean to throw out the fish hook to the language teachers listening to this as well, because Laura's been talking about geography and sociology, which you know we keep hinting. No, it seems there are areas which are easily exploitable by in language curricula, and I think it might have been Lithuania, it might have been Estonia. I can't remember what it was. You were doing a plenary. And I was listening to your plenary, and I think you started the plenary in an unusual way. You asked, you know what's coming, don't you? You asked the audience in pairs. You gave them about a minute. You said, which European country? I think you said which country in the world consumes the most ice cream per litre.
Did I do that there?
Per person, yeah. And it was brilliant. It was a great start to a plenary. It was, and so you gave them about a minute, and I was talking to somebody, and of course you come up with these, well, I suspected, of course, that it would be a counterintuitive answer. So I suspected the answer wouldn't be Italy, because of the gelato culture. But that was part of your trick, of course, which was great. And if you were doing that with kids, of course, that would also work. And I remember that the answer, if you're listening to this now, just put on the pause button and just think about what you think it is. But of course, the answer is counterintuitive. I think it was Finland, no?
Sweden.
Sweden. Okay. Well, apparently Finland's high up there as well. Now, in fact, the Scandinavian countries in general.
Scandinavian countries generally, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I thought it was Finland. But what's interesting is that if you just take that, if you start an English class like that, but thinking about stretching and deepening that sociological, geographical content, then you would say, okay, it's actually Finland or Sweden. Why do you think that is? And of course, some of the reasons are really interesting. One of the reasons being that, of course, in Finland and Sweden, in the Scandinavian countries, it was quite difficult. Crop farming was risky in the past. Way back in the past, even after the Neolithic period, it was difficult to rely on crop farming in those climates. And so what they did was they bumped up and increased the dairy cattle in those countries. So there's huge amounts of dairy cattle. So what happened was that early on, after the Neolithic period, the lactose tolerance thing in the Scandinavians dropped off. So they're much less lactose intolerant than the rest of Europe. So off you go. Look at all this stuff you've got. And you can just keep going.
You're absolutely right.
Comparison. Compare the 14 liters per person in Sweden with Italy, and it's actually double. So all this counterintuitive stuff is brilliant. And you can go into industry, you can go into sectors, you can go look at it. In terms of content, why would you not want to exploit that? And you just did that. You just got us thinking in that
daily life, using daily lives as a foundation for developing language.
And then you come back to local context.
Yeah, sorry, I mean that is what Laura does talk about, doesn't she? In adapting the material she's got to work with, she makes them fit the local context, and that applies equally for language teachers.